Millard Thomas of Locked On D-backs hasn't liked any Giants offseason, hasn't liked the team going into any year since he began hosting Locked On D-backs in 2020. But this year, of all years, Millard, is he high on the Giants?
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Now, without further ado, to preview the upcoming season and talk about the D-backs and Giants and how we've ended up here through the pandemic. Giants, a 107-win team. D-backs, a 52-win team. And now we enter 2025. Where do these two teams stand? To break it all down, we got Ben Kaspick of Locked On Giants, bringing him back to the pod. It's been too long. The people have been wondering, where is Ben? Ben, what's up?
Hey, it's great to talk to you.
Hey.
Missed you yesterday. I was having some sweet dreams when we were supposed to record, but yeah, it's been way too long. And hey, we're 3 weeks away from opening day as of this recording for the Giants.
Yeah, I
I
know.
don't know when the D-backs open.
This is like the most like anxious part of the season when you look up and you're like, man, we're still like 3.5 weeks from the regular season starting. It's like, how long is spring training? Sometimes it just feels like it drags forever, but it is a fun time to at least see your team be back out there, especially see some of these free agents that your team might have signed this past season. And of course, we were talking about a little bit before we got on the podcast, just speaking of free agents. I know both of our teams have had interesting off seasons. Willy Adames was like the big pickup for the Giants. And for the D-backs, of course, our big pickup was probably in the rotation, getting Corbin Burnes. But as you mentioned before we started recording, in our recent game in spring training, D-backs versus Giants, a lot of the D-backs players were asked about Corbin Burnes for agency, and they all felt like Burnes was going to go to the Giants. So as the Locked On Giants host, what did you feel? Where did you feel Corbin Burnes was going to land this offseason? Like, were you kind of in? Did you feel like it was like a match made in heaven? Did you feel like you guys were the favorites? Like, how disappointed were you when he went to the D-backs, and what did you think the likelihood was that he was going to come to San Francisco?
I thought it was pretty high. I thought that they were the favorites, and there were all kinds of reasons why. Blake Snell departed in free agency. They've so frequently had like a number 2 pitcher behind Logan Webb with Kevin Gausman and then Carlos Rodon and then Blake Snell. Like every offseason, they've kind of brought somebody in to be that guy. And there was obviously a regime change, which is something we could talk about with Farhan Zaidi getting fired and Buster Posey now calling the shots here.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't entirely clear what their behavior was going to be like and what kind of changes they would make. But once they signed Adames to a long-term deal, it seemed like, okay, they're in it to win it. And, you know, they're not going to shy away from these long-term deals. Like I've talked to you year after year about the Giants shying away from long-term deals for pitchers. Well, it might be different now because they have Buster Posey and not Farhan Zaidi running the show. And Corbin Burnes is from California. He went to school near San Francisco in college. And there was like a need in the rotation. They ended up signing Justin Verlander. But Corbin Burnes himself said the Giants were not very aggressive and that their offers were not competitive. And so the reaction was definitely disappointment, but the Giants do have a lot of talented young pitching. And so I think that ultimately comes down to why I think they're in a position where they feel like they need to like force the issue and get like younger talent involved versus signing a 30-year-old pitcher to a 6-year or more contract.
Yeah, and it's not like the D-backs went out there and said, Corbin Burnes, here's, $200+ million, here's the franchise money. It was Corbin Burnes who picked up the phone and said, hey, I want to come to Arizona. This is the kind of contract I'm thinking of. And the D-backs had to go back and said, you know what? Let's look at the numbers. I think we can make this Corbin Burnes contract work within our payroll. And so when you think about the D-backs for Giants over the last few years, Corbin Burnes picking the D-backs essentially over the Giants. Maybe if the money was the same, he would have chose San Francisco. But thinking that since 2021, we both came on around the same time. Giants in 2021, 107-win team, was a surprise of the National League. D-backs at the time, 52 wins, 110 losses. And since then, the Giants have been like around a 500 team. Meanwhile, the D-backs trajectory has gone upward. They went to the World Series, and now they're kind of like the model franchise, you could say, in Major League Baseball in terms of drafting, development, trading for guys, signing players. Like, they've done everything right around the margins. And so I just want to know, as like a Giants fan, how do you feel about the direction about your team since 2021, winning 107 games, and where you are now entering 2025? You talked about changing the front office, going from Zahidi to Buster Posey. Like, how do you feel about the current direction about the San Francisco Giants?
It's a little tricky. 2021 feels like a distant,
Hard, bro.
distant
Yeah.
memory at this point, right? Like we all were wondering, like, how real was it? Well, it turns out it wasn't real. It's like a fact now that they've had 3 seasons where they've hovered right around 500 the whole time. It's been very frustrating to watch. Um, in terms of the direction of the team moving forward, like I alluded to, I think they bring in like a really good, relatively young free agent in Willy Adames, who's 29 all year basically, and they needed a shortstop. Brandon Crawford, has retired, and they got no answers there right now. And Adames is an answer. They also extended Matt Chapman during the season last year, and he was really good for them last year. And then they've got some young guys that they're, I think, trying to force the issue with and mix in, and they did that maybe under the radar a little bit last year. They had some young players like Heliot Ramos and Tyler Fitzgerald have really good seasons, and they've got pitching that I think a lot of people aren't familiar with a lot of these names, but I think they will be soon. Like, I think a lot of people know about Kyle Harrison. He was a top pitching prospect. He's kind of been okay in his major league career, but they've got a lot of other arms in Hayden Birdsong. This guy is nasty, and he's got like a total baby face, and he's just out here throwing, upper 90s with like wicked breaking balls and off speed pitches. And Landon Roop, who's got like one of the better curveballs around, and Carson Wisenhunt, who has one of the better changeups in the minor leagues. Like, it's graded on the scouting scale like an 80 grade changeup by a lot of scouts, and he's looming in the minors. And there's like several more guys too, and they've got a lot of young position players like who don't count as prospects anymore because they've played a little bit in the majors, but they also haven't established themselves fully, like Marco Luciano, Luis Matos, Casey Schmidt, and there are others. And so the direction is kind of like fun for the first time in a while. They're not just like this old veteran team anymore. They're transitioning more towards youth, but they still have some of those veteran guys who are actually good in like Matt Chapman and Willy Adames, and some young established players like Logan Webb and Patrick Bailey as well. And Jung Hoo Lee coming back, and he missed most of last season, and we don't quite know what he's going to do, but they signed him to a $112 million contract, so they expected a lot.
Yeah, the Giants are actually a team that I'm kind of optimistic on entering 2025. I want to save some of my thoughts for segment number 3 when we break down the NL West. You touch on some players there because I want to discuss with you some X factors from the Giants, from the D-backs, players that you think can swing the season for 2025, and some players that you think like it's nut cracking time, it's make or break time, where you've given them the opportunities. Guys like maybe it's like a Marco Luciano. I'll let you answer that in segment number 2. But guys who you're like, if it doesn't happen this season, I don't know if it's ever going to happen for that guy. So we'll discuss that with Ben Kaspick of Locked On Giants in segment number 2. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. FanDuel is the app that is easy to navigate, and the variety of bets keeps every game exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly, no waiting around for your winnings. Whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add some extra excitement to the playoffs, FanDuel has you covered. My favorite thing to do on FanDuel is the same game parlay. Whenever the Suns are playing, give me KD over on 25 points, give me Booker over on 25, and give me the Suns money line. When it hits, which is not very often, it brings a big smile to my face. If you want a big smile on your face, just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, back here on the Locked on Diamondbacks, Locked on Giants crossover, discussing a little bit about the journey of our two teams through the pandemic. But entering 2025, give me an X factor, Ben. This doesn't have to be like a guy who just like on the cusp of making the roster. This could be a known player, but it could be Jung-Ho Lee. It could be anyone you name, because I actually have a guy for your team that I think could be a huge X factor for the Giants. I want to get your thoughts on. How do you feel about former Arizona Diamondbacks pitcher Robbie Ray entering 2025? Because I was looking at his game log from the end of last season, and the strikeout rate was still insane, around 13 strikeouts per 9 innings. And really, if you look at the log, it was really one blow-up start against the Braves where he gave up like 5 earned runs in 2/3 of an innings pitch. But in like his other 6-7 starts, like he was pretty good. He was pretty solid. Obviously, he hadn't pitched the whole season, coming back from Tommy John. So if it's a fully healthy Robbie Ray, I just want to know how you feel about him in your rotation. How do you feel about him as an X factor for your team in 2025?
I think that's a great call on an X factor for the Giants in 2025. I honestly feel like there's a ton of guys who would classify as an
Yeah,
X
I feel like the
factor.
whole team is probably,
The whole team, pretty much. I mean, there's some guys you know what you're going to get for the most part, like Matt Chapman, Willy Adames, Patrick Bailey's going to do his thing defensively, Logan Webb's going to do his thing. But then it's like you look at the rest of the roster, we don't know what Jung-Ho Lee is capable of because we just haven't seen it yet. And but Robbie Ray, that whole rotation. I mean, you look at a 42-year-old Justin Verlander. That's an X factor, right? Like, is he?
I forgot about him actually.
Yeah, like what? That's a total X factor. I mean, if he's good, which I'm hesitant to say he will be, given that he is in fact 42.
Do you still think he has gas left in the tank, though? Do you still think there's still juice with Verlander?
Apparently, he was throwing like mid or upper 90s in his bullpen. So if he's throwing that hard, then yes. But I'm not going to bank on it. I don't think they should bank on it. I think he's their number 2 starter, apparently. And they are banking on it. But like I said, they do have all this young pitching that Verlander got a full no trade clause. It's one of the things you wouldn't have probably seen under the old regime. But yeah, Robbie Ray, huge X factor. If he can, I mean, he won the Cy Young Award. You know, it was a while ago in 2021, but he hasn't pitched that much since then. He pitched basically one season since then, and he had a 3.71 ERA with Seattle in year 1 of that contract. And then, let's be honest, that was a good trade for the Giants. They got rid of Mitch Haniger and Anthony DeSclafani, and they ended up with Robbie Ray. And Robbie Ray has the potential to be a very good pitcher, like you mentioned. I mean, his strikeout rate was exactly 33.3%. So every 1 out of every 3 batters he faced in 30 and 2/3 innings last year, he struck them out. And so, yeah, and he did have that one blow-up start. I remember him not making out of the first inning. But he looks slimmer, which is odd because he's normally like very thick and tight pants and all that. But yeah, he's an X factor. Jung-Ho Lee's an X factor. Tyler Fitzgerald, Heliot Ramos, Justin Verlander, Jordan Hicks in the starting rotation. Yeah. Like, there's so many guys who it's like we don't know. There's a lot of volatility. Like, are they going to be good? Are they not going to be good? We don't know. But if they are, there's upside. And that's one of that they've lacked upside, I feel like, in recent years, but they have some now, including those young players that I mentioned.
Yeah, this is what I don't understand from the Giants, because I feel like they want to be good. They want to be competitive. They spend money on Jung-Ho Lee, Willy Adames, Matt Chapman. They even signed like Jorge Soler. Like, I always feel like they're trying to add to their team. They have the meetings with the big free agents. But then, like you said, they enter a season with 42-year-old Justin Verlander as their number 2 starter. I just feel like The math isn't mathing, Ben. Like, they want to be good. They want to act like a big market, but then you have one of the oldest pitchers. Yes, he's decorated. Yes, he's a first ballot Hall of Famer, but Verlander at this point of your career, if he's in your rotation, he should probably be the number 5 guy.
100%. He should be your number 5 guy. And maybe he will be by the end of it if Robbie Ray is good and if Jordan Hicks is good, which he really was for the first part of the season last year before he wore down. Remember, he was transitioning from the bullpen to the rotation, and he did wear down. Like, he was good, and then the velocity dipped, and he got fatigued. And he added a bunch of muscle. Cliche, best shape of his life, But so we'll see. And then these young guys, they could take over. That's what I'm saying. Like, don't be surprised.
Who's the
D-backs
most fun
fans.
young guy that you like? Who's the
I
guy that
like
you want
them
D-backs
all.
fans to watch the most?
Uh,
There's got to be one.
The most fun is probably Hayden Birdsong.
Okay.
He's just got nasty stuff. He's big and tall. He kind of, he's got the build of a 22-year-old Justin Verlander. Like, he's tall. He's got power stuff. Strikeout rate was probably pretty high. I don't have his numbers pulled up. He at times was overpowering. The under the radar guy, though, I think is Landon Roop, which is a little bit of an odd name, but I think it is a name people are gonna come to know, in my opinion. And then Kyle Harrison, he was so is Brandon Fott. That's a name, right? That's his name, Brandon, right? Brandon Fott.
Yeah. No, yeah, Brandon was
like,
the crap that you were
I had
going
to learn how to pronounce
that.
that last name because I knew about him. But of all those guys I'm mentioning, Kyle Harrison was the most highly touted prospect, and so he's around too, and he's like 22 years old, so 23. So I forget what the question was. Yeah, Justin Verlander being your number 2 starter. It's not. That's what I'm saying. That's why Corbin Burnes made like so much sense because they did kind of beef up the lineup with Adames, but it's like if you go out and get Corbin Burnes and Logan Webb, that's what the D-backs players were saying. I think it was Zach Gallen. He's like, I really thought he was going to the Giants because, he's got the Bay Area ties, going to school there, and that would give them a really good rotation. And we were kind of shocked that he came here, but we're happy about it. So
yeah, I mean, Burnes and Logan Webb's probably like the most underrated pitcher in the NL. So if you had those two, and then like you said, if Hicks puts it together with Kyle Harrison, and then my favorite guy, Robbie Ray, like that could be a pretty legit rotation. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. But is there a guy like probably a youngster, maybe he's like a 5th-year guy, but it's like it's time to crap or get off the pot. Like if you don't produce this season, if you don't, do something positive, like I'm just done with you, I'm off you, like I'm ready to trade you, cut you, whatever. Like, do you have a guy where it's like it's this year or it's never going to happen for you?
yeah, I do because and in fact it's not really just an opinion. It has to do with the fact that they're gonna be out of minor league options going into next year. And so these guys who only can be optioned one more season but have yet to really fully establish themselves, those are the guys who need to put up or shut up, as you've kind of said twice.
Mhm.
And that's what happened with Joey Bart. Remember Joey Bart? He was a highly touted prospect, number 2 overall pick, and he ran out of minor league options and never performed up to that point. And then it led to him being on the Pirates because he wasn't performing and they couldn't send him down. And they had Patrick Bailey doing better things, and so they were forced to move on. And so anyway, yes, the guys are Luis Matos, who had like an unbelievable. He was the player of the week. He just went off for like when he first got called up. He's only 23 years old. He was like a top 20 something prospect. He graduated as the number 12 overall prospect on Fangraphs as a 2023 graduate. So he's only 23 years old all year. He just turned 23 in late January. And Marco Luciano is another guy. And he's been a top 10 prospect in baseball, according to different publications. And he is entering his final year of optionability. And so he needs to put up or shut up. He's 23 years old all year until September 10th. And they've moved him to the outfield, but he graduated as well. They actually moved him down because he struggled as he got into the upper levels of the minors. But he was when he was in the lower levels of the minors, like a top 10 prospect in baseball.
Yeah.
And so he's another guy. And then Casey Schmidt is another guy. He's now 26. Finished the year really strong, really, really good defensive third baseman, but they've got Matt Chapman, but he's also versatile. He's played short, second, and third. But he's got a lot of potential. And yeah, so those three are really the main ones. And also they need Heliot Ramos, who's also out. He's out of options to continue on to build on his breakout season. Otherwise, but I mean, he already did it, so I don't want to throw him into that category. Like he had the breakout season, but he's got to keep it up. Otherwise, they can't send him down, and then it leads to issues.
Yeah, Luciano is probably the guy I was thinking of, because it just feels like the narrative around him just feels so low right now. Especially like you said, you go on to his Baseball Reference to look at the minor league rankings for him. He was a top 30 prospect to top 15 prospect like the first 5 years of his minor league career. Like he was a super talented, highly touted guy. And you look at his numbers through the first couple of years on the major league level, not a large sample size, but not a lot to show either. And it feels like it's been the defense that's been like the biggest issue for him, right? It feels like that's been like the thing that's held him back the most. And maybe it's like affected his offense too, because I think a guy like Blaze Alexander last year for the D-backs started the first 2-3 weeks of the season really hot, but had some struggles defensively, made a couple errors, and it seemed to really affect him mentally, offensively. And so do you think some of that has also affected Luciano? Like what's been up with him and his development with the Giants?
That's a great question and like a great point because that's exactly what happened. He was playing shortstop. Like they were stubbornly keeping him at shortstop, where scouts continued to say like the Giants keep playing him at short, but he can't play short. And they kept doing it. And he came to the major leagues and like Brandon Crawford was gone and they didn't really have a shortstop and they played him there and he just was bad. Like he made a bunch of like critical ninth inning errors for like over the stretch of like a 10-day period. He made like 5 critical ninth inning errors. And that's got to get into your head if you're a young player and you got to, it became like unplayable. You can't have him out there. He was a liability costing them games on defense. And so then they were going to move him to second base. So they sent him down to work on that. And then eventually by the end of the year, they said, we're moving him to the outfield. So he's now playing outfield. And it's a whole new position. He's never played outfield, but scouts for a long time have said they think he's best suited for a corner outfield position. And so I guess you definitely could make an argument that they waited too long to do that. But he's now an outfielder. They already optioned him out of Major League camp. So like I said, he can be optioned this year, but he cannot be optioned next year. They're already using their options on him now. So he's got to prove himself as an outfielder. And hopefully he's good. I saw him make a diving catch. Giants haven't televised many spring games, so I haven't really seen much of him in the outfield. But
Yeah, that's been the issue, right? For spring training, no one's been able to watch their team.
well, yeah, especially the Giants haven't broadcast a single game yet, which is just for a big market team. It's just very disappointing to a lot of fans, and I understand why. I think finally on Saturday they're broadcasting their first one, but yeah, we'll see. I mean, he's got to play the outfield, and there is an opening potentially in right field coming up with Mike Yastrzemski, but otherwise, Heliot Ramos and Jung-Hoo Lee have a pretty solid hold right now on left and center. But Yaz is going to be like 36 towards the end of the year, and it's his last year before free agency. So there's an opening in right for somebody. One of these young guys that I mentioned, like Matos or Luciano. There's a few other outfielders in the mix that could be that guy. But that's where he's gonna have to do it. It's probably gonna have to be in right field, or at least maybe they could move Ramos to right and put Luciano in left. But regardless, yeah, he's the perfect guy for this category, I think.
Yeah, and the saving grace, like you said, only 23 years of age for a guy that was a top prospect like every single season as a teenager. So there's still a lot of time left with Luciano, despite his early struggles in his career. But I want to talk about the Giants and how we feel about them versus the D-backs versus the NL West entering 2025. We'll break that down in segment number 3. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. My favorite Wonderful Pistachios I actually have right here. Sorry to the audio listeners only. You're going to have to go to YouTube for this one because right next to me, I got 3 of my favorite flavors here. And this is what is great about Wonderful Pistachios. Unsalted right here, no shell. Chili roasted, no shell. And then this one is roasted and salted with the shell. The great thing about Wonderful Pistachios is the variety. You could get salted, unsalted, with shell, no shell. Get a little kick to it if you wanted to. No matter what flavor you want, they have a variety and a profile that fits just for you. So please go get yourself some Wonderful Pistachios. Get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Hey, there they are, the Wonderful Pistachios. Are you just pounding?
They're good.
Pistachios left and right?
What?
You're kind of matching. You're kind of matching with the Pistachios package.
Oh, yeah. It's stylish. It goes with my thing. Hide
That's
the bleach spot. Yeah.
That's for the sponsor right there. We're about the people.
I picked these up at a car dealership.
Oh, really? That's
Yeah.
That's our sponsor for you, man. You could go anywhere in the world and you could find your pistachios. The car dealership, the grocery store,
California car dealership. Yes.
They're all over the country. Get your pack of Wonderful Pistachios today. They're absolutely delicious. Back here on the Locked On Diamondbacks, Locked On Giants crossover. And now, Ben, let's actually get into the nitty-gritty. I know we got our NL West preview roundtable coming up. I never get to speak on those. This is our opportunity to talk, Ben. I want to hear your thoughts on the NL West and how you actually think it breaks down. Obviously, we all got the Dodgers as the favorite. They're gonna win the division. Like, lock that in. They're gonna win 100 games or whatever and win the division. But talking about the rest, how do you stack up 2 through 5? Do you think there's a team that can even challenge the Dodgers in the division, not for the title, but for like the actual NL pennant? Like, just tell me your thoughts about the other non-Dodger teams.
Well, I think the 2023 D-backs proved that if you just get in, you can challenge anybody. The Dodgers won 100 games that year, and you guys just swept them in the first round. So,
yeah,
and you
only issue is they spent like $3 billion since that postseason series to load up their roster.
That is a fact. Yeah, but they've always been just so good, and they don't always win. And so that's baseball, Like they were close to lose. They were 1 game away from one loss away from losing to the Padres in the division series. They had to win 2 straight, and they did. And if they lost,
and the Padres disappointed. The Padres should have won that series. I picked the Padres.
They had all the
I had all the
going to I had Yankees Padres World Series.
Okay.
So and it ended up being Yankees Dodgers. Yeah, yada yada yada. Who cares? Forget about it. But yeah, I talked about this today on my show. Like first place and last place are like well established.
Yeah.
And then it's the 3 in the middle that are like a little less, not a little less. Like the Giants have finished in 4th, I think, the last couple years, but they finished like 20 games ahead of the Rockies.
Mm-hmm. And they're not a bad 4th place team. They're frisky. They've been frisky 4th, like right around 500.
Yeah, right around 500. Right. But they're like 20 games ahead of the Rockies. So I got the Rockies last. I got the Dodgers first. No shock there. And then I think the D-backs are a cut above the Giants or the Padres.
Whew, that's what we wanted to hear, Ben. That's why the listeners wanted you back on the show for that kind of
because I give them the credit they deserve. But I think the team that is a little bit risky is the Padres because they didn't do much this offseason, and they've got some guys that are about to hit free agency. They've got some spots in their lineup that they're just trying to kind of plug in, random veterans who are not that good. And like if you look at their projected lineup. I know they've added some guys since, like random guys like Jason
Jose
Hayward and
Iglesias.
Jose
They just
Iglesias. Like so they
yeah.
plugged some holes in that way, but uh, I don't know. And then their rotation. I mean, Dylan Cease and Michael King, great, but then you're looking at you Darvish is like 39, going to
Oh,
be 39. Anyway, so I
Pavetta.
think the Padres certainly could be good. Joe Musgrove, Tommy John surgery, going to be out all year.
Mhm.
Uh, Padres could definitely be very good, but they also could be one of those teams that just has a super disappointing year, I think. Like they have a low floor and a high ceiling.
Yeah, I think that's
Um,
the best way to describe them, to be honest, because they feel like the most maybe like volatile variance team, maybe next to the Cubs or probably above the Cubs in the National League. Because, like you said, they're like a season away where if Bogarts has another down season, Machado continues to decline. It's like this is a very expensive no outs roster where it's like Machado's making around 40 million a year for like the next decade. Bogarts is locked in for the next decade. Darvish, Musgrove, they're each getting like 20 million a year for the next like 3 or 4 years. Like you said, Darvish is 39. Like there's a world where this thing becomes a disaster so quickly and there's no outs for them. But there's also a world where it's like, would I be that shocked if they made it to the World Series this season? Probably not, but I'll let you continue your statements.
no, yeah, I think that's 100% right. I mean, you look at they like Jackson Merrill is like a godsend for them and the
Mm-hmm.
breakout season that he had, like, and they just find a way to do that. And that's kind of what's annoying about them from my perspective is, I mean, good for Jackson Merrill. I don't think he won Rookie of the Year, right? Somebody else, oh, Paul Skeens,
Yeah, yeah.
uh, but Jackson Merrill had a great season, so that's huge. And but like they have Luis Ariz and like Michael King and Dylan Cease all in the last year of their deals, and those are like the guys who aren't old and expensive, and then the guys who are like old and expensive are locked in. And so we'll see how that all turns out in this year, and then 2, 3 years from now, and then 5, 10 years from now. Like they have these guys locked up, but the Giants, I think, are a nice like mix between Arizona and San Diego. They've got
Mm-hmm.
I like my hot take would maybe be the Giants finishing ahead of the Padres, and it's not that hot of a take,
I
given
don't think
some
so.
projection systems actually have like even projection systems usually like the Padres quite a bit, but this year, I think they pick up on the volatility of that team, and there's a lot of scenarios where it goes south for them. And I don't know. I'm not going to come on here and say the Giants are going to win 90 games. I think like they look again like a 500-ish team, but it's baseball. If you win a few more games than that, you could win 84 games and go to the World Series like the D-backs
Yeah,
in
it really depends on what
2023.
year you get. Yeah, because
Yeah.
23 D-backs, you an 84 negative run differential, you make the postseason, go World Series. Last
Yeah.
season, D-backs lead the league in every offensive category, win 5 more games than the previous year, 89 games, and you miss the postseason entirely. So it all just depends on the season, timing, all this, all the many variables. So right now, like the hot take I'm considering is Giants third wildcard team. Like I'm really considering it. I will give my official prediction when we
Please.
get to the NL West
Please.
roundtable, but this is
We
the
need
most
it.
optimistic I've been about the Giants since 2021, probably because I'm typically not a fan of their off seasons, but this past
No.
free agency, I thought they probably overspent on Willy, but I do like the player. I think he's going to be a big addition to the lineup. And just overall, Robbie Ray coming back, Logan Webb's a stud. Verlander's old, but like he's still Verlander. You still never know with him. Like he could still turn back the clock for one more season. I wouldn't be surprised. Jung Ho Lee, like talking about X Factor. So, like you said, there's just so many swing pieces on this Giants team where it's like if they hit the best case scenario, the best version of themselves, I could see them as a mid 80 wins, third wildcard team that could be frisky all season. That you get to the postseason, anything can happen in baseball. So I want to see how it plays out a little bit longer. But the Giants, I'm considering giving a hot take that maybe they could make that third wild card spot. But I probably have to look at the NL Central a little bit more. Cubs versus Brewers, if I like either of those teams, if I think the Central
And
could send 2 teams to the playoffs or not.
the East is a problem with three good
Mm-hmm.
teams. That's a problem. It may be that just one team other than coming out of the East makes it. And so it'd be like who finishes in second, maybe in the West, because you
Yeah,
got the
and they're
Phillies, the Braves, and the Mets all good.
yeah.
So,
And the Reds still might be frisky. They got a lot of young talent
and the
too. You
Brewers,
never
like,
you never
yeah,
know. Yeah.
yeah.
The Brewers are one of those teams where it's like I haven't liked their team like the last 3 years, and then you look up, it's 90 wins and the division title every year.
Every time.
But we know
Time.
but we know when we get to the postseason, pick against the Brewers every time as well. That's a regular season team there. Ben Kaspick, any last thoughts before we depart today? It's been so long, so I want to make sure you get everything off your chest before we leave today.
Well, I just remember you during our NL West preview. I'm looking forward to it because I don't remember what you said, but I remember you took shots at me and the Giants.
Oh, did I?
Out of nowhere. Out of nowhere. You just like had it in your pocket the whole time. I'm just going to take shots at the Giants. So I hope that this year that we gang up on Javi and say the Padres are going to like lose 90 games and like everything's
I'm down. I'm down to do that because I definitely was down on the Giants the 2 previous years, but it might be the Padres' turn this season. I like that call. Yeah. I'm down if we all just come in. It's like, let's just all collective as a group just crap on the Padres for the next 30
We know that Jeff Snyder of Locked On Dodgers loves to do that, so
he's in Arizona. Didn't even hit up Locked On D-backs for a crossover while he's here. What's going on, Jeff? Hit the boy up. We could do something in person. Please follow Ben on everything. Ben, where can the listeners find you? You tell the listeners. Where can they find you online?
Oh, gosh. Whatever it's called now. Twitter, X, at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. I'm on Blue Sky, at benkaspick.com. Pretty fancy. And that's about it. What about you? Where can the listeners find the great Millard Thomas?
Yeah, at Creator Thomas 24 for my personal account on Twitter. Look up Locked On Diamondbacks, both Twitter and Instagram for the podcast handle. And please hit subscribe to Locked On Diamondbacks, Locked On Giants, wherever you stream your podcast, and on YouTube as well. Another edition, another crossover, Locked On Diamondbacks, Locked On Giants. Hopefully it doesn't take months until the next one. Ben Kaspick, enjoy your day, sir, until we speak again, which I think is going to be pretty soon on our NL West division roundtable. So until then,